Chris. Well, let's get warmed up a little bit. It's a little before 12, but let's get warmed up and then we can get into it. And this call is, recorded, so it'll all be there for people in the future to hear when they want to at their leisure.
No problem.
So it's good to speak to you today, Chris, chairman of Kodiak Copper. And of course, we know what you're most famous for, and that is one of the biggest junior mining wins in the last decade. Almost $2 billion takeout by Kinross in, I think it was early 2022 was when it closed.
Yep.
We spoke August 2023, and we had a really good conversation about what you're up to, about Kodiak. So I'm just kind of interested because you said in that 2023 conversation that you've been looking at a lot of projects since the big win with Great Bear in 2022. Obviously,
Yep.
you've got some newfound capital, and people are obviously trying to pitch you new ideas. So we'll get to Kodiak soon, but I'm just kind of interested. A year ago, or was it 7 months ago, you said, I look at a lot of deals. I'm not really interested in much so far. Has that changed at all? Have you been seeing a lot of new projects?
Oh man, that's the thing about unicorn hunts, Robert. They don't you don't find a lot of unicorns, even though you do a lot of hunting. So I have recently been on some site visits on projects that have made it through sort of the review process on my behalf, and that is quite time consuming and onerous with many dead ends. And there are some things I guess the word would be preparing to get busy with. So I did actually purchase a control block in a CPC listed company, Railtown Capital Corp, just sort of as a preparation for launching something new, and got a couple good people that I know involved in that on the board. And then that sort of formalizes that review process and gives me access to sort of some of the time of people whose opinions I value. So that's been going quite well. I don't have anything to announce yet, but I have made progress on a few points. So I think that's where that stands from what I can talk about publicly point of view.
Okay, so that's your new vehicle. That's your new area of focus. And with Railtown, you're doing some due diligence on a number of projects right now. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. So it's gotten to a fairly advanced point on a few of them, and some of these things like my focus has been really on finding an asset that could have that sort of transformative potential, like something like a Great Bear or like the Gate Zone discovery potential that we had with Kodiak. But really, like I'm looking for, like I said already, it's a bit of a unicorn. So these projects are going to be in interesting jurisdictions, or they're going to be interesting geologically, or a combination thereof. And that means like some of the ones that I've looked at have basically dead ended on on advancing through permitting or other things like that, and other ones are just quite complicated technically. So I think we're getting close to finding a sweet spot where we have sufficient data to look at to show us that we have something of merit and that transformative potential. And that's what's really important. So there's a few of these things that are in that advanced candidate phase. Nothing tied up yet, but certainly some fruitful due diligence has happened recently.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Can you give us any hints? Is it copper, gold? Is it in Canada? Is it in the Americas?
There's copper and gold projects and copper gold projects. Those are really the commodities that I'm most interested in, and North America and Europe as well. And
Oh,
that's about all I can say.
okay. All right. I won't press you any
Yeah.
further on that.
Hmm.
But copper and gold sounds good to me. Those are my two metals of focus, and I've been pounding the table on them so far in 2024, and it's been doing pretty well. So, turning to Kodiak Copper, which is an explorer that has a lot of copper and some gold too in BC. What's new at Kodiak? I mean, we spoke last August. We had, results come out from the 2023 program. Some new areas of high priority, it seems. Some older areas you might be saying, not going to go back there again.
Yeah.
What's new at Kodiak?
Well, like I know when you talked about this previously, it's like coming up on a year ago now. Like I like this project because I like the belt of rocks that it's in. I used to work at the Mount Poly mine, which is the same belt of rocks. We've got Copper Mountain, which is located just south of where the Kodiak project is. And the thing about that Quesnel belt is like you have this sort of periodicity of these, kind of about 200 million year old volcanic centers all through that old island arc. And they occur at, fairly regular intervals, repeated intervals as you go, north south along the belt, south north, whichever way you want to take it. And in this area, there was a noticeable lack of known major porphyry centers. And yet there was a lot of copper in the historic work over a big area. And it was just kind of clear to me, as the guy that was looking for projects for Kodiak back several years ago, that this area had that sort of big scale potential. And sure enough, as you know, we just followed up on very basic nested porphyry theory and followed up with a major discovery pretty much as soon as we got the project, the Gate Zone discovery. And so since then, what I've been doing is looking at this big mass of data that we're collecting from across the project, and it's like 20 kilometers long, right? So it's a really big area now as we've added claims to it over the years. And what we're seeing is that there's two of these volcanic centers that were developed on the project, and two major centers, and these occur around the world. These tend to occur where you get these major structural intersections. Like these are faults that go down deep in the crust and they let these porphyry magmas come up. And usually where these big structures cross each other, you get these volcanic centers. And there's now two of these that we know about on the Kodiak project, one of them on the north end of the claims and one of them in the south end of the claims. And the way these will work is there'll be pulses of these porphyritic magmas that come up in different areas, and it makes multiple porphyry centers. And that's exactly what we've been seeing. Is like, we used to think that there was, one or two. Now we're up to like over a dozen different targets. We've drilled 5 or 6 of these so far, showing that we have these porphyries in all these different areas. And last year we did some deeper drilling just to follow and see whether these things have scale. It was very important to know, like, do we have enough potential here to generate tonnage for a future, if it's going to be a major project, if it's going to be a mine, is there going to be enough material? And you want to get a feel for that before you go and do the density of drilling that you need to get a resource together. You go and you do these deep holes, you do step out holes and this sort of thing. And that's what we did last year. And we saw that we have porphyry systems that extend for vertically like, kilometer plus. And we found out, particularly in the south part of the project, that we had really nice copper grades in the near surface at some of these targets, like the west zone, the south zone, and then we had these big long intervals of mineralization. So the zones were actually, the porphyries are actually quite a bit bigger than anybody thought initially, and they have these higher grade zones within them. And fortunately, with the drilling that we did last year, we can see that high grade mineralization goes right to surface at some of these targets that we've been drilling. So that was really the focus of last year: show the size, show this multi-center potential. And ultimately, my feel for the project is that in the future, if it's going to go ahead and advance up to mining stage, it's probably one of these assets like Copper Mountain, like the Mount Poly mine where I used to work before, where you end up with a bunch of separate different, zones that ended up getting processed together. And I think that's really what you're going to end up with here at MPD, should it all continue to go well. And that's what we've confirmed with the drilling last year.
So what I'm hearing you say is multiple porphyry centers at the MPD project, and because it's such large scale, you're going to have multiple zones that will eventually potentially be mined. Last year, the man zone, that target was sort of one of the areas of focus in 2023, and it seemed quite promising. And I don't think it's dead by any means.
No,
but 0.34% copper over 116 meters, 0.45% copper equivalent in total.
Mhm.
If you could get a wider intercept of that grade, you'd be golden. But it seems like the grade runs out or it gets lower at some point at Man. Are you going to go back there this year and test it further?
Like, man, we did some deep holes. Like, we do know the better grade is concentrated up near the surface. I wouldn't say man would be a major porphyry target. What it could be is a nice starter pit type target. So we're really interested in the grade that's in the first 200 or 300 meters there. So we saw what we wanted to see in terms of that. What we now need to do is look at some of these other zones, like the west zone, the south zone, where similarly we had good grades in the near surface, and see whether those make enough volume to basically potentially make sort of a multi sort of pit scenario that would feed together into one area. And based on the data that we have, like the drilling that we did last year, it looks like it does have that. So we just need to do more of that drilling. I think there's a bit of an education process that Kodiak needs to really unlock more value for shareholders, number one. And that's really to show people that even though we did these really deep, long holes, we are seeing the grades that we want to see in the near surface. So there tends to be this connection now because the initial gate zone discovery was high grade, but sort of starts at a couple 100 meters depth. So sometimes when I talk to people, they think all the copper at Kodiak is at depth. It's definitely not the case. There's a lot of mineralized material that's up in the near surface, and there's actually good grades in that stuff as well. So really with a project like this, my feeling is it's not going to be about the total volume. It's going to be concentrating enough volume or defining enough volume of better grading material in these near surface zones to basically start the project off in a future sort of production scenario. I think that's what bigger companies are going to want to see. I think that's what's going to be sort of rewarding to shareholders, is to see that narrative sort of clarified, that there is this material present and that does present value. And that's what the company is probably going to focus on this year, in addition to, and I say probably because there's some interesting developments going on with targeting and AI and these things that we can get into. So I would say that what we need to do is show that near surface mineralization and test some of these new targets that we have, which have come up through our own work and now this AI work that we've been doing.
Yeah, I want to talk about the AI in a little bit. But yeah, let's talk about the gate zone. So the gate zone was the discovery in 2020 that really turned Kodiak on in a big way. You had like a 10x run in 2020. But this happens in junior mining a lot, where a company makes a new discovery with one of their first holes into a new zone, or with a new interpretation of an old zone. You hit tremendous grades. I mean, in BC, to hit 46 meters of 1.41% copper, 1.46 grams per ton gold, and 5 grams silver is absolutely out of this world exceptional.
Yep.
And the whole intercept was 535 meters at 0.49% copper, 0.29 grams per ton gold, and 1.76 grams per ton silver. So that's exceptional porphyry grade basically anywhere in the world over that sort of interval. But how do you follow up on that, right? That's an exceptional hole to try to top, right? And so far it seems like the company has not been able to sort of match those holes at gate. Why is gate so exceptional, and why are you having trouble finding that kind of grade elsewhere on the property?
Those are actually good questions. So I'd say this way, there's nothing exceptional about Gate. Like, the geology of Gate is very similar to the geology of all the other targets on the project. It has a similar geophysical signature, a similar alteration halo pattern. It's very similar to everything else that we see, similar like copper and soil anomaly developed on top of it. Everything sort of matches the other targets. The difference is that we had more drill data immediately adjacent to the gate zone that showed us early on there was holes that had almost grazed into it, right? So we had drill hole data available when we got the project, which made us look for this target right away. It was one of the things when I was looking at the original data set that really stood out in my mind. And that was one of the deeper holes that was on the project to that date. And it was showing alteration signatures and everything associated with better grading copper. We just didn't have that information at other targets. So Gate got hit first because we were fortunate to have a near hit on it from the past. And then you have to go out on the project, and there were no similar drill holes to that anywhere else on the project that had sort of that depth or had grazed into better targets, other than areas like the West Zone that we followed up on recently and also developed good mineralization. So there just wasn't the data to make that discovery again. And the property package, because of the nature of it, there's so many of these porphyry targets that really it's a prioritization process for us. We need to go out and collect the data. You need to do it systematically. Even though there's been a lot of work in the past, it hasn't been done consistently by one group. So there's a bit of soil data here. There's a bit of geophysics over there. There's a few drill holes here. There's some shallow drill holes there. There's missing assays all over the place. So we had to do a lot of cleanup work, a lot of consolidation. And now it's a prioritization of targets to figure out, well, where else are we going to see these grades that we saw at Gate Zone? And we do see them locally. Like there's a zone called the Adit Zone on the south part of the project, which has similar grades to Gate. And there was actually, it's called Adit because there was some historical production there back in the early days of people just seeing this higher grade copper mineralization. And that's a target we haven't even drilled yet. It's probably something that we're going to get to this year. I would imagine there'll be holes in that immediate vicinity. So like these are the things. It's a reflection of where the historical data was, and then us going out on. It's not a brownfields project per se because there's very little past development, but it's a big project with all these different targets, and we had to sort our way through all of them. So that's really the long form answer to your question. There could be more Gate zones. We're just using the tools in our tool chest here with all the data that we've been collecting to try and see which one of these other targets is going to be of those sort of grades and tenor.
Okay, so when you say more data, are you referring to soil sampling, rock sampling, doing an IP survey, like property wide? What specific examples of data does Kodiak need to gather to find new gate zones?
Yeah, it's all of the above. Like one of the things that works really, really well here, oddly enough, and we were not expecting this, is the soil data. So, like copper in soils, gold in soils. Oddly enough, like you're sitting in a previously glaciated environment, like it's like the central BC plateau, and you can see that there was glaciation, and you can see glacial deposits, and you would expect that there would be dispersion of the copper and the gold over a big area. It's not what we see on the project. When we have copper and gold in soils, we drill below that, and inevitably we get copper and gold in the bedrock below that. So that's worked super well. And then geophysics, like these IP surveys that we've done, we have regional mag data, other things like that. You're basically building up a fingerprint for the areas that have good mineralization and seeing where that fingerprint is repeated elsewhere on the project. So it is because the project is big, like it seems like a slow process. Like you're taking hundreds or thousands of soil samples and hundreds of rock samples every year. But it's like a very pixelated view of the property when you first get it. Like it's not a lot of resolution in any area, or it's certainly inconsistent. And as we do more work and more of the same type of work over a bigger area, we get a higher resolution view, and then we understand the targets much better. And that's the sort of stage that we're at right now. Is this year with the company going in for the exploration program in 2024, we'll be able to use this correlated like geophysical, geochemical, and drill data from the last few years of work. And I think that will give us some, much better guidance that we had on the project than when we started out.
Okay, yeah, like in the last 6 months, I've learned more about IP surveys and porphyries than in my entire prior 44 years. And the resolution of the data is really key. Not all IP survey data is the same.
No.
And it takes a lot of work to get to hone in on the resolution. So let's talk about AI, and let's just assume that I don't know anything about how to use this tool in mining exploration. So what is the AI showing you? How are you, utilizing this? And I looked at the news you put out, that Kodiak put out several weeks ago, and I look at this one target. I think it's the Omicron target. It jumps out of the page. What's going on there, and why does that one look so good?
That's funny. Like with the AI, like it's obviously the topic of the day right now in investment spheres everywhere. Everybody's talking about AI, but this is really the AI that we're using here. It's a long process offshoot of really earlier computer-based techniques that we would use, and I used to do 20 years ago. Or even longer, something called an index overlay method. And what you'd do is you'd take a GIS system, you'd feed your data into it, and then the geologist or whoever it was, me, I'm a geologist, you'd build a linear equation, and you would basically you would pick variables like from geology or geophysics or geochemistry or structure or whatever, and you just build up like A plus B plus C plus D equals your a prospectivity score, and I've done that, and it's quite good, and it can work really well when a geologist understands a project well. And certainly, you would build these sort of maps that look a lot like the ones that you see in Kodiak's news releases, with sort of like a numerically graded sort of target prospectivity. The difference, though, like it's a major difference now emerging, is that in my mind as a geo, I could keep track of 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 variables, something like this, where I had an intuitive feel or the experience from drilling or exploring the project of what would be the most important. But now the AI that we're using is doing this with like 30 plus layers of information. And it's, in a sense, like it's doing it in a less biased way than I would do it. So it will look at things like when you look at the maps that we've output from Kodiak, like it's following like regional magnetics, it's following like radiometrics, it's following geochemistry, it's getting trained on our drill data, so it sees the relationship between all these other different variables and copper and gold grades, which is fascinating. And it's following regional geology, so that the geomaps that are put in there, some types of units are just inherently more prospective than others. And in a way, it's unbiased because like it's taking all these factors and weighing them itself and giving you an output. But it's still at the stage where training that general AI model, there's a lot of human input going into it in the early stages. So it's taking data, with the Verify guys that we've had, it's taking data and methods that they've developed over the course of the last several years as the basis for its machine learning, and it's augmenting all of that with the specific data from our project. So it's in a sense learning as we are more about the property using basic understandings of geology, geochemistry, geophysics that it's learned previously from other projects. So it's an iterative process, and the more we use it and the more that system is used, the better it will get. So in a way, you're sort of building the car as you're driving along with it. And it's benefiting from the experience in the past, but the more we use it, the more it learns about our project specifically, and the more these targets get refined. So it's a very interesting process, and I think it's going to be a very powerful tool for our geologists, but generally in the future, other geologists, because I know I'm talking a lot here, Robert. I'll just keep going for a second. So
Okay.
one of the things, like we want to see efficiencies in our drill programs. Like we want to take, ideally in our world, like you want to take $10 from your investors and you want to take $10 and put that into drilling and make a big discovery, and everybody benefits. But we all know we have to pay people to work, and there's other factors these days that we have to put money into that were not a factor 20 or 30 years ago. So a portion of every company in the world's budget is going to go to community relations and consultation and environmental reviews that weren't necessary in the past. And there's going to be other factors, so that maybe these days, if a company raises $10, it's spending $7 on exploration and $3 on these sort of other cost factors. So there's just inherently, as regulation has become more stringent, and community outreach has gotten better. These are things that have genuinely improved. You end up with these inefficiencies of raised money into exploration work done. And one of the really good things about AI that I think is one of the most promising things that it does is it's like having another geologist on staff at low cost, but somebody that has the ability to process these massive data sets. And it's a tool that brings efficiency back into the geologist's hands so that, now more of those dollars raised are going back into exploration, even though we're doing all the other work still, because now some of that interpretive, iterative work that everybody has to do, the data grinding and the iterative review, is being done by machine learning very rapidly. And I think it's going to be a very, very powerful tool as it gets refined through time that geologists can use to basically get those efficiencies back in the project too. And with that, I'll take a break of talking for a second.
No, that was really good. I'm glad you kept going there because that was good. It makes a lot of sense. A lot more of a company's budget is going to environmental and social factors than just on the exploration side. I mean, if you don't allot a significant amount of your budget to environmental and social, engagement and outreach, then you're probably doing it wrong in 2024. That's very interesting to hear what you say about AI. And, we've had AI, we've had those two letters around for at least 5 years. In fact, there's some other publicly traded companies in Canada that have been talking about AI in exploration since at least 2019, but it wasn't well understood. And I think it was still very young back in 2019, 2020. Obviously, it's grown up a lot in the last couple of years. It's become incredibly more powerful and more potent. And, I just wonder, so the more data you feed this, the more powerful it's going to be. I mean, that's just logical. That's obvious. But there is a bit of a sampling bias because, take a look at the MPD project. The northeast part of your claims doesn't have as much data as the northwest or the southwest. So there would naturally be a bias for the AI to say, hey, the target's on the northwest because that's where you've drilled and that's where you have the IP data, that's where you got the soils. And it wouldn't be able to identify it on the northeast because it doesn't have as much data. I mean, is that right?
Yep, that's partially true. Yeah, like you basically want to pick the out of the regional data that you have, you want to pick the one that is most tightly correlated to mineralization. But you're right. Without data and without information, your predictions are going to get a lot fuzzier, right?
Right. So then let's talk about, you could walk me through that graphic from the Kodiak News on May 8th, the AI target sort of map and the Omicron target. I notice it's between Prime and North Star in an area that I haven't really seen Kodiak talk about before. What is that showing us there? And how do you think it came up with that target?
Well, there's without addressing a single target specifically, I'll address the AI targeting generally, I think, and that's probably more useful in that sense. So one of the things that I think everybody needs to realize as you work with AI, certainly in the early stages, and we all are, like, we have to say we're at the early stages of this technology because it's being built. As we feed it data, it's being built and it's getting smarter the entire time. So it's able to pick up things like, and you mentioned before, you've had a lot of education around IP work and porphyries. And, there's certain things in porphyries like strong chargeability signatures related to the pyrite that's sitting in the ground. Basically, like you have a lot of disseminated sulfides in the ground, which are able to absorb a charge. And you see these huge balloons on your IP of these pyritic halos around your mineralized zones, right? So it's going to see that. The AI is going to see that in a number of areas. It's going to see the geology that it likes, the monzonites in this case, that tend to host mineralization or associated with it spatially. It's going to see those things because we fed that data into it. And then it's going to see stuff that we just didn't expect. Like what we look at when we look at regional data, like there are targets that are developing in the AI right now that just, I guess the best term would be they refuse to die. So like we have areas where our geos have walked around and they've picked up, we have this blue target, for instance, which is like 0.6, 0.7% copper in grab samples, and a big coincident like geophysical anomaly, soil data that shows there's copper there. It's a great target. We would drill it anyway. The AI also sees it, and the AI also wants to drill it. But other targets like our Dillard zone, which is a big low grade porphyry, and it is big, like it's like over a kilometer in extent, right on surface. The AI loves that one because it says, "Oh, right geology. It's got copper. It's got all the geophysical signatures. It's got everything, and it's a huge target." So it just loves that one, for instance. And we don't need to find a lot more Dillard type targets. We need to find West Zone type targets, and we need to find Gate Zone type targets because there we've got the grade that obviously helps tip a project forward. So the AI will give you zones and it'll give you targets, but it won't at this point distinguish between low grade and high grade yet, for instance. So it's up to our geologists to go through the output targets like this Omicron and these other ones and say, okay, we've got verifying high grade copper in grab samples, or the geophysical signature really matches what we saw at Gate Zone before, and we've got to do the prioritization on that target. So the AI is a little bit binary. Like, that's probably the best way to say it. It sounds corny because we're talking about computer stuff. But it's kind of giving you a 0, it doesn't like it, or a 1, it likes it, and it's up for you. You've got to take that output and you've got to rank it yourself. It's not at the point where it can rank a target yet. So we use structural data, geochemistry, geology, geophysics, and we're the ones that have to do the prioritization of which of all these new targets that it's developing will we go after first. And what you said before is spot on. Like, there are areas where it's generating targets where we have done zero field work, and we keep saying it's like we've tried tweaking the AI inputs, we've tried tweaking the outputs, like we've been looking at all these different filtering mechanisms, and some of the targets it generates are just they won't go away. So these are the ones when we're saying, okay, we've got a brand new target from AI that we haven't done any field work on, but it will not go away. That's very intriguing to me because like it's seeing a combination of factors which is really mimicking what we've seen mineralization in areas that we haven't gone into yet, and that's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, that's the word I was just about to use. That's absolutely fascinating because if the AI is seeing something that no human mind is seeing or understanding, then you have to ask yourself, what is it seeing? What did we miss? And inspect it further. So can you walk me through how Kodiak is approaching this 2024 season? You have the AI, you have a few targets it showed you, you have your own targets. What work do you need to do on the AI targets to be able to say, okay, we need to, drill this now?
It's like the first thing that you do is get in a truck. This project's super easy to access because it's right off the side of the highway. So, it's not like you have to get in a helicopter or travel up to the Arctic or whatever. You can basically, you can be there within 3 hours of Vancouver. So we've got, when the field season is launched, which is coming up here shortly, the guys will get in the trucks and they'll drive right out to where the AI target is pointing, and they'll know pretty much right away, we've either got an explanation for this or, oh my God, this is a brand new target. It reminds me of a sense like I used to work at the Mount Poly mine, and I know Mount Poly's like it had the tailing spill and everything after I left, by the way. I wasn't there during any of that, but we made this, my boss, Pat McCandless, made this incredible high-grade copper discovery right at surface in an area of the project that nobody had gone to. And basically, it had been skidded, like there was forestry work going on, and a skidder had come through and opened up new roads. And Pat was out there prospecting and basically found all these, like, malachite and nazarite altered rocks and high grade copper. And lo and behold, it was the Northeast Zone discovery. And that turned into the high grade feed that the mill needed to restart the mine. This is back 20 years ago now. And I never forgot that. Like, you were in an existing mine that was already open pits, there was already production facilities. It had shut down because of copper prices at the time. And this high grade material was just sitting there on surface, it just with that sort of ability. It was like a light switch capacity to turn that mine back on, and nobody had gone there because it was in an area that nobody thought there would be any mineralization. And that's the thing. Like, we go out to a project like MPD, and we know that we have these big porphyry centers all over the place, and it looks like if we get material combined from all these things, we probably have a major project in our hands. Maybe something like this GT Gold scenario that was taken over a couple of years ago for just about $500 million. It could be sort of similar to that. We obviously need to do more work, but that transformative discovery potential is still there because it's such a big project. And that's why I really like seeing that these new targets pop up on the map, because we simply haven't had time to go everywhere yet. And but there is the regional data, and now that we have more of that regional data and it's being filtered through AI, it's supplementing the areas that we've been able to do the prospecting on, and extrapolating that over a bigger feed. So, do we need to make another major discovery to make the project work from an economic standpoint? I don't think so. Like, I actually think Kodiak, by just sort of defining further what it has, I think it might already be there. But that transformative potential is really always what really excites us from an exploration standpoint. So this year in 2024, I want to see more good drill holes come out of the zones that we know about, but I also want to see some of these new targets tested, because it's like the Gaystone discovery. That is the best feeling in the world, to know that you found something right under the nose of all the people that were there previously. It's what we enjoyed the most about the Great Bear situation, was that we found all this, millions of ounces of gold in rocks that were not supposed to be the gold host, right? And this is the same process. We found high grade copper at MPD where there wasn't supposed to be any. And now, that potential to find another zone, that's what really gets you excited as an exploration geologist, is that ability to make a brand new discovery in areas that people just either haven't gone or just widely dismissed.
So walk us through the 2024 program, both in terms of how many rigs you think you're going to mobilize, how many meters you estimate will be drilled, what other field work, do you shoot more IP across the property? And then final question, because that's a big question, do you drill any of these AI targets this year?
Well, I would like to. Yeah, honestly. We got to get geos out there, verify why these things are popping up in some of the cases, why they can't be killed by all of our modeling work. And if we find good copper mineralization in those areas, or indicate good indications, yeah, we can get a rig on it this year. So I think the program, like I was saying earlier, what we need to do really to get Kodiak, to get the momentum back really into the company, is to show, to get rid of that narrative that the copper's all deep, because it is shallow. We do have shallow mineralization. So it'll be shorter drill holes that are more precisely targeted within the areas that we know about, the porphyry zones that we've already discovered, to develop near surface copper mineralization at good grades. We need to get those out into the public sphere at some point in the future. That drilling will be useful for resource calculations as well, though we're not doing that yet. That will feed into that at some point in the future. So we need to do that, and then maybe with the other half of the program, take it and test these new targets that we're generating now through AI, and the targets that our geos have developed over the last few years. So there's a combination of those, and those will, we've been ahead. We're ahead on the permitting curve, so we have a number of these things permitted to be drilled already. And we have good relationships with the government and the local First Nations groups. So the new ones, once they're verified through like these AI targets, I would imagine that those would be ones that we can get drilled sort of towards the end of the season. So it'll probably be, my guess is, somewhere in the neighborhood of about a 10,000 meter drill program. So a substantial size drill program, but more focused. I want to focus on good grades in the relatively near surface, or right from surface, so shallower holes, and strategically testing these new targets based on what we're seeing coming in with the field work.
So 10,000 meters, that sounds like it's 2 rigs, is that right?
It will be a 2-rig program, by midsummer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Belcara and Blue will be targeted in the north of the project, and then you got 4 targets in the south, including South and 1516. And then potentially, depending upon what the field program turns up, you might test one or two of the AI targets. I mean, is that what I'm hearing, you say?
Yeah, that's correct. And these things, it's geology, it's exploration. We hit a big hole on any of the new targets. We're going to follow that copper mineralization, just like we've done on the past, because we know that's what investors will be happy to see, and that's what our geologists need to know. So these things are always subject to incoming information, and we've been surprised so many times at MPD by more copper in more areas. We even hit like high grade, we hit structurally controlled high grade copper gold mineralization last year. We had gold coming out of the west zone in lots of areas, which was clearly like a late gold enrichment effect. There's all these like surprises. Every time we go in there with field crews and with the drill rig, we always find something new. So that's what our plan is so far. Probably roughly about a 50-50 mix of drilling nice targets that we know about in zones that we know are going to yield good copper and new material. But obviously, we play it by ear, and we get excited by a new target. We will put more effort into it, right? We'll put more focus on that.
Okay. If someone in the audience has a question for Chris, please ask to speak and I'll activate your mic and you can ask a question. My next question, I guess, is do you love exploration, Chris?
Like, I'll be honest, like I have tried to take some downtime, after the Great Bear sale. And there I some of the projects that I've looked at, these are simply like, raise the funds, get a mine into production, or go through like a feasibility pathway and then get a mine in production. Like that interests me a lot less than that sort of transformative discovery event. Like that is the best feeling in geology. And it's like one of these guys that I know is an investor guy that I met years ago. His name was Jerome Rack, and he's an interesting guy if you ever look up BC Securities Commission filings and other things. But he said something to me that I'll never forget. And he said geology is the best. It's the only legal way in Canada to generate huge amounts of wealth out of absolutely nothing. I always remember that in the sense that, you're always one drill hole away from just adding all this value into the market. And I've lived through it. Like with the Great Bear scenario, we lived through, buying a project for $200,000 and selling the mining project and the royalty company for $2 billion. So it was like a 400 odd percent annualized rate of return, through the several years that we developed the project. It was absolutely insane. And that's what you really get addicted to, in a sense, is like it's the best feeling in the world to let your geologists, to let your scientists, to give them the money and the free reign to make those discoveries, and then to transform your shareholders' lives. Like the stories I had out of the Great Bear scenario, when we had people that were absolutely making transformative impacts on their life because they were shareholders. Those are the best. Those are the best feelings in the world. Like my business partner in Great Bear, Bob Singh, he started the Singh Foundation, and now I'm a donor to it. He manages the foundation, but you're changing the lives of like impoverished kids in like inner city areas of Surrey and other parts of the Lower Mainland in BC. And it's like these are the differences that you can make in lives, and this is really the offshoot of good science, good capital markets, good capital market sentiment and management, and basically that ability of exploration geology to create wealth out of basically nothing. Everybody can benefit from that. Our First Nations partners, our shareholders. It's been an incredible experience. So, do I like exploration? Hell yes. I think it's.
Yeah, it sounds
I
like
think
you
it's
love
awesome.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
it
sounds
is.
like you love it, and you have good reasons to.
Yeah.
You're good at it, and you've generated a lot of wealth for shareholders through it. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, without exploration, especially in a country like Canada, the wealth wouldn't be there unless people went and found this copper, gold, whatever in the earth, and we're able to find it in large enough quantities to get it, built and extracted, and do it in a responsible way that is environmentally conscious. And I know that's
Exactly.
something that
Exactly.
that Kodiak really cares about a lot. And the location of the project is really ideal. I mean, this seems to me like this is kind of an under the radar, sort of higher torque year for Kodiak. The share price has consolidated in the 50s.
Yeah.
Share structure is still pretty tight,
Yeah.
and it's pretty under the radar. I mean, I don't see anybody on social media, or not many people talking about Kodiak. So I think it's a real opportunity for you guys to get the momentum back and really show that there's a lot more at the MPD project, and this really could be something of large value. Let's talk a little bit about the share structure and who owns the shares of Kodiak. So if you could just run down, who are the largest shareholders of the company? How many shares do you own? And what is the company's current cash in the treasury?
Just generally, I think you could look at the corporate deck. I'd have to think we like biggest shareholders. Like you're looking at like myself, Claudia Tornquist, as an individual level. We have a number of Great Bear shareholders who are significant shareholders of Kodiak as well. There's some European families who are significant shareholders through sort of our financial contact network. We've had various investment funds on the registry in the past and currently. So it is quite it's quite retail held still. We're sort of aiming to repeat the strategy that we had at Great Bear, where we went through takeover. I think there we were at about 65% retail owned by the time at the point we were taken over. So it was a total anomaly from that perspective. And the reason I'll just philosophically, one of the reasons I like that approach is that, you know, ultimately retail shareholders are the ones that set the price in the market. And this just generally like many CEOs, many companies will focus on building a more institutional focused shareholder base at an early stage. And I think a lot of the time that's a mistake. And I think it's a mistake for a couple of reasons. The main one being that if you're largely institutionally owned, the difficulty that you have is that the fund managers that have accumulated positions, they really don't have as much control over their ownership and sell timetables as a retail investor does. So if the stock goes up 15%, they're probably going to solidify that gain, and then they'll just be there again when you go through. So if you're majority, institutionally owned, there tends to be quite a wet blanket effect on how the share price can perform. If you're predominantly retail owned, like a Great Bear was, or like a Kodiak is, you can do a lot of communication. It's a lot of work on the phones, talking to everybody on a day-to-day level, but you can really generate a loyal shareholder base. And these are people that don't want to see 15%. They want to see 400%, 500%, 1,000% returns. And that means like when you get a discovery like Gatezone or other discoveries like the LP fault at Great Bear, you end up with shareholders that follow you through all the way to the end of that process. And we know I have friends that were, they owned 1 million shares of Great Bear when it went through takeover at, just about $30 a share. And it was absolutely transformative on their lives as individuals. And, so you get, I think when I went through the Great Bear takeover, what's interesting, you can incentivize management in different ways, right? I'm just going to ramble here for a second. But myself, because I owned about 1 million shares of Great Bear and about 500,000 options and some RSUs and things going through the transaction, it made me really focused on making sure that we got the best price available on the point of takeover. And it made me very, very focused on the mechanics and the tactics that takeover process, in particular building competitive tension once we had a major discovery. And I wanted to make sure that, my share position, which was not millions and millions of shares, were highly valued on an individual share basis. And I think that's a great approach to go through with these companies, is like, if you let the CEO of any of these deals load up at 5 cents or 10 cents and then basically never buy another share, they're a lot less interested in the progress of the share price because they're sitting on a massive unrealized gain, right? So you can see that it works out well for them, but it incentivizes you to go through a transaction at an earlier stage. So I know I'm getting off on a tangent here, but it worked out really well for me. It worked out really well for shareholders in the past. And I'd say I'm sitting at about the same shareholder level in, you know, with MPD, with Kodiak right now, as I was sitting with Great Bear around when it went through transaction. And one of the advantages of having a multi-season exploration program is I participate in every financing that Kodiak does. I buy stock in the market sometimes. Basically, I'm there along with Claudia, along with some of the shareholders that we know quite well. And we look for a repetition of that kind of success that we've seen in the past. So it's less about loading up cheap and trying to sell the company too small. It's about owning the shares, controlling the share structure, and having it go through transaction at the best value. So that's really a different approach. It's a different
Yeah,
philosophy.
I think that's a great point to make. There's no cheap paper in Kodiak, and all of it has either been through financings or bought in the market. You also didn't mention Teck as a 9.9% shareholder, right?
Yep. Teck is the major shareholder. They are the largest one. They've been a good shareholder throughout, and I think, like, over time, as the project gains profile and sort of gets more advanced, I think a good strategy for the company is to make sure that we're on the radar screen of a number of different major producers. Because again, it's great having a big shareholder like Teck on the registry. They've had good technical advice for us, but ultimately, we do want to see that everybody is aware of Kodiak as the project gets more advanced. So I think over time, I'd like to see that major shareholder registry expand. And I think that's a good approach for the company to take.
This has been a very informative conversation. I've learned a lot, and I look forward to seeing the company put out several updates this summer as the drill program and the exploration season evolves. Can you just wrap it up with maybe the timing of news flow? Like, when can we expect the drill program to commence? And do you expect Kodiak to put out news once a month or once every 5 to 6 weeks? What have you?
Well, I think program is going to start soon. I've got to talk to Jeff Ward and Dave Skelton, who are the guys that basically run the project within our staff. But it'll be starting really soon. And I think on the news flow side, like, because this year is not going to be focused on drilling like these kilometer deep holes, you're going to see news more frequently. So I want to test new targets, and I want to test zones of good grade within the porphyry areas that we know about. And that means, like, there'll be faster turnaround on the drilling. So I would aim to get news out kind of monthly. Hopefully everything cooperates with operating the season, but it'll be more frequent than what we saw last year because shorter holes take less time to process in the lab, and you get more of them done. It's not like if you drill a total of 1,000 meters in one hole versus 1,000 meters in 5 holes, you're going to get a lot more results back with the total of 1,000 meters in 5 holes, because those process quickly, they go to the lab quickly, and you get sequences of results more quickly than drilling these really deep ones like we've done in the past. So more news, more frequently, and targeting areas that I think the market will be interested in.
Very good. I think that's a great place to wrap up the conversation, Chris. I appreciate your time. And, let's do it again in a couple months, hopefully when there's, results to talk about, maybe, later in the summer. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And this will be up on my YouTube channel in the next few days, Goldfinger Capital, and you can view it and hear it at your pleasure. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Have a great day. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks,
Cheers.
Robert.